podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Virginia Tech fans, this is Zach Mackey, and it's time to stack up your game day favorites. The wings, chips and dip, burgers and dogs, and of course, Coca-Cola. Whether you're watching from the stands or your living room, nothing goes better with football than Coca-Cola. And this season, be on the lookout for the value collection, including 6-pack mini cans that are perfect for sharing. Coca-Cola and football, always a great call. Go Hokies.
This episode is brought to you by Amazon Ads. Every good storyteller knows there is no story without an audience. Amazon Ads can help tell your brand story to audiences who are leaned in and ready to hear what you have to say. All on Freevee, Twitch, Amazon Music, Thursday Night Football, exclusively on Prime Video and more. Learn more at advertising.amazon.com.
Welcome back to the Love Tennis podcast with me, James Gray of inews.co.uk and the iNewspaper. I'm joined, as always, by Calvin Betton, our resident tennis coach, and George Bellshaw, the tennis writer and broadcaster. I never really know what to call you these days. George, what's your preferred title? What are your professional pronouns?
Well, I have written a piece that will be going live this week for Metro. So
That is exciting.
One to watch out for. It's been a while since.
Do you want to tease what it's about at all?
Yeah, it's about the Williams sisters for Black History Month.
Okay, cool.
I actually interviewed Calvin as part of it.
Gosh, how did you track him down?
Yeah, he was the toughest person I've had. So I've got him, Chanda Rubin, talking about her experiences kind of playing them both. Got Max Wilander, Annabelle Croft, and Mickey Lawler, the WTA chairman.
Very good.
So should be good. I think it's quite a long read. That's what they've asked for, and that's what they've got.
Yeah, it's very different when you start getting paid by the word, George.
I was thinking today, I don't know if I've missed something here. Has Venus actually retired?
I don't think so. No. But presumably, when that happens, we're going to have to go through like something quite. Yeah, like, and I haven't got appetite for it.
It's quite funny because like a lot of the conversations I've had, not actually with the people I've interviewed, but just other people I was kind of talking to around this piece. It's funny how like little is people start talking about Venus. It is quite a kind of strange part of their career now that Venus, should be kind of heralded as one of the greatest of all time, and she is, but she's been almost so overshadowed by her sister's brilliance that she sometimes just feels an afterthought now.
Yeah, I find it interesting when you look at Venus's career that how much she actually won, and then I found myself thinking like, well, when did she win all this? Because like it seems that like Serena came around about 18 months after Venus did, but then Venus has this whole career of just dominating women's tennis before Serena did. But my sort of thought was that maybe she had a couple of years and that was it. But how many slams has she got? She got about 12.
Seven. It's only 7.
Oh,
only.
Right?
But yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that because it almost feels like Venus in many ways. Like her era was like the start of Serena's era, and you think about all the people who were around then, like Davenport and Hingis and whatever. That's almost the era I kind of think of Venus like being that good. But actually, yeah, okay, she's had time off with the sport, lots of kind of health problems that have happened as well, but she's going to outlast Serena, which feels really odd. I suppose like the weird is she did have a couple of slam finals in like 2017, didn't she? Like Australia and Wimbledon when she lost to Muguruza around that time as well.
There's also though she's only like a couple of years older as well. Like you say, it does feel like a different era.
1 year.
Just
older.
1 year older, is it?
Yeah.
But it feels like you say, it feels like a different generation as to when she was in her prime.
Yeah, I think of her as like 4 or 5 years older, just kind of conceptually. Yeah. Like, I don't think of her as 1 year older, but yeah. But maybe when she retires, we can do a big pod on the full relationship.
Yeah, we'll dive back, unpick all 7 slam wins.
I just hope it's about a year Because after Serena and then Roger, I mean, she will presumably retire at the US Open, so I reckon we've got a year.
We've lost Del Potro this year as well. I mean, that's 3. When was the last time tennis lost 3 such big names in 1 year? Not to say Del Potro is on the same plane as Federer and Serena, but, big for tennis.
Yeah, and also hadn't been active for quite a long time. But you can say the same about Federer and Serena, quite frankly. That's the weird thing is, and I guess it happens in individual sports a lot. Like people, and maybe it just happens in sport all over. People don't retire when they're still interesting or good, really, very much. I mean, no, I mean seriously. Like, much as Federer and Serena did some damage at the end of their career, they both retired 2 years after they were really relevant to the game, other than in sort of figurehood.
Federer kind of joked about that, didn't he? Like he was saying, you always want to go out on a high, and I lost my last Wimbledon 6 love. I lost my last match. I lost the Laver Cup for the first time in my last tournament.
Well, guys, everybody can't be Eric Cantona.
Yes, it's true. If only.
It is strange though. I was talking. I don't know. I don't know if any of you guys saw it, but I did a thread the other day on tennis trainers from the 90s. And I got talking with a friend of mine about McEnroe, about his late era McEnroe, about the trainers he wore, and we used to wear this really thick bandana. And we were talking about how, he was a veteran then, and he still sort of made this run to the last round of Wimbledon. Sorry, the semi-finals of Wimbledon, when he was really past his prime. And I think the age that he was 32. And it just shows how different we look at tennis now. I think that was 92 when he did that. So maybe 33, 34 maybe.
Just talking to trainers, Calvin, that heralded one of the funniest comments on our YouTube channel. We are on YouTube. If you want to listen to the Love Tennis podcast that way, you can. And maybe soon you'll get some visuals as well. But a guy called Pravesh commented a couple of weeks ago when we had quite an elongated chat about trainers. He said, "Cannot believe you lot went on about trainers for so long. It was like my girlfriend going on about a thing and completely diverting to another, and I could not figure out how and when the conversation changed." and to be honest, recording it was a bit like that, because all of a sudden we were talking about trainers for a good 20 minutes.
It's actually we spoke. I think we spoke about that. We talked about how long they lasted and that kind of thing. And in that thread that I did, there was a pair that was around about 95, and Jim Courier wore them, called the Nike Air Resistance, and they were made of Kevlar, was specifically so they'd last, and they came with a 6-month guarantee. And as somebody commented on the thread, and I may or may not have participated in some of this, that some people used to take a sander to the shoe after about 5 months and 3 weeks to take advantage of the guarantee and get your another pair free.
Wow.
They always lasted 6 months, but they weighed about 17 kilograms.
I see. Do subscribe to us on YouTube, by the way. Love Tennis Podcast. We do have 69 subscribers at the moment, which makes me think I don't want any more, because obviously that's funny. But overall, let's make it 690, and that would still be funny. Welcome to the YouTube channel this week: George Jimenez, Gustav Fitchard, Ilya Tsiss, and Sharon Williams, who may be the next Williams sister, who knows. The other way you can get in touch with us or kind of interact with the podcast is by leaving us a review or a rating wherever you get them. You can do reviews now on Spotify, people tell me. You've always been able to do them on Apple Podcasts. If you've done it before and you've not left us 5 stars, you can always change that review and upgrade it if your opinion has indeed changed. And remember, if you do leave a 5-star review, I will read it out. Just as this week did John Blom, the umpire, who you may remember from the Australian Open. He was my star of the Australian Open. He has one of the great moustaches in tennis. He wrote thusly: "I recently came across these podcasts and have been working my way randomly through them. My 5-star rating is not based so much on a wide sample of listened to podcasts, but mostly for the kind words in the episode you did after this year's Australian Open final, which I've just listened to. Though I was initially a bit miffed, I must admit, that you didn't know who I was, having worked at all the Grand Slams, done some important challenger finals such as the Busan Open twice, Bratislava, Tampere, Kalundra doubles, Bengaluru both 1 and 2, and the Taipei Open in 2015. I'm sorry for missing the 2015 Taipei Open. It's on the bucket list. Not to mention Chengdu, Ningbo, Shenzhen, Anning, Liu Zhu and Zhu Hai in a 2019 Chinese clean sweep I thought you might have. Sorry, John. I'm sorry. Believe me, I know who you are now. He says, I assume these events are not covered in the 164 episodes I am yet to listen to. Never mind, the shows are still great, with the right mix of banter and humour and tennis insights, so keep it up. Sending you the best and kindest regards from Seoul ATP 250, promoted. Take care. Thanks for getting in touch, John. It's always nice to hear from people kind of on the inside of tennis when they get in touch. It does happen fairly regularly, so... great to have a representative of the umpire community, who I think are a little bit of an underrated element. I do have a bee in my bonnet about Hawkeye and Hawkeye Live and all the things associated with that, which I think we talk about every now and again, but maybe we'll get John on to offer a rebuttal to Hawkeye.
I think you've left out an important detail about this week's review, James, is that you weren't convinced it was John Blum for a while, and you thought it might be a really bizarre internet troll for a little while.
Well, I mean, bizarre is maybe the wrong word, but, you know, you should, George, as a proper journalist, be sceptical of almost everything. And, you know, given that there is one particular reviewer who regularly changes his name and his opinion of the podcast and just updates his review, I felt it right to be sceptical. But then John actually ended up DMing me and we had a bit of a chat. So, yeah. Nice to have you on board, John. And I think because he's just working his way through random podcasts, you might not listen to this for a while. But, you know, I don't know, happy Easter by the time you listen to this, perhaps. Let's move on, shall we? We've got quite a lot of tennis to talk about, and we're already 10 minutes in and we haven't even really started. We're going to talk about Novak Djokovic, Daniil Medvedev, Stefanos Tsitsipas, as well as Carlos Alcaraz, who has been back in action for the first time since winning the US Open. We'll also chat about Barbora Krejcikova, who beat Iga Swiatek in a final, and that's no mean feat, as we know. We'll chat a bit about Emma Raducanu and the Billie Jean King Cup. Francis Tiafoe and Taylor Fritz in final action as well, and a little bit of Nick Kyrgios. We should also offer our congratulations. I believe Rafa Nadal has become a father for the first time. Someone actually pulled me up on the phrase becoming a father for the first time. You don't need to say for the first time, you can only become a father once. After that, you're a father forever, and once you have the second kid, you're still a father. A two-time father, you might be able to call him. But there is only one place to start this week. Novak Djokovic picking up his second title in a row. He absolutely dominated things in the Astana Open, apart from perhaps the semi-final, which we will talk about. He beat Christian Garin, Botic van der Zandschulp, Karen Khachanov, a victory over Daniil Medvedev by walkover, and then 3-4 he thrashed Stefanos Tsitsipas in the final. I believe that is the scoreline by which he always beats Stefanos Tsitsipas. I could be wrong about that, but there is some weird record about him beating Stefanos Tsitsipas 3-4 in finals, I believe. It's happened at least twice before, I can tell you that much. George, a really dominant week for Novak Djokovic. His second pretty dominant week in a row, having won the title in Tel Aviv. Well, what do we take away from that? It's his 90th ATP title, well on the way to the Jimmy Connors record, which I know has drawn a few comments on the old YouTube as well as on Twitter. What do you take away from this week in Astana?
Quite a lot, to be honest. I think the big question we had about Novak last week was, okay, the competition wasn't really there. Was he going to be really pushed? And the field in Astana, you know, for whatever reason you may think this is the case, was it really strong? It was probably
hang on,
close to
let's
a
not
Masters draw.
pussyfoot around this, George. As you may have actually read in an excellent New York Times article by Matt Futterman over the last week or so, if indeed you have a subscription or a way of getting around the New York Times subscription, Kazakh tennis is extremely well moneyed by an extremely well-off man.
It is indeed, yeah, and yeah, it's
these players are being paid to be there. Like,
they're being paid
a
ton of money, I'm sure. But yeah, look, anyway, regardless of how they all got there were lots of very good players, and it was a pretty competitive field. I think we wanted, you know, before the Medvedev match, I think we all felt this would be a good indicator of what Djokovic's level actually is, because he's not really had to play. Well, I mean, even at Wimbledon, he's not played who you'd call in the bracket of the top players, like Alcaraz,
top
Medvedev,
players.
Nadal. Okay, Kyrgios was in great form and is a fantastic grass court player, but he's not traditionally been going kind of that deep in the slams and was at first final, etc. So yeah, I think this was a good week. The Medvedev match was brilliant. It was obviously a really jarring end, but incredibly high quality second set tiebreak. And I thought Tsitsipas played fine, played pretty well, hit well off the forehand, and Novak was just kind of getting on top of him, returning amazingly well. He's in one of those weeks where he's sort of like Pete Sampras serve bot as well, and that's a pretty unbeatable combination. So yeah, I think it's just strengthened my view, and I'm not going to be too nice to Novak this week because I upset one of our listeners on Twitter, didn't I? But yeah, he was very good, and I think he's clearly coming back with the bit between his teeth. And if he gets to Australia, I'm still fairly convinced he'll be the man who'll pick up the title there.
Yeah, big if getting to Australia, of course. I mean, Calvin, do you think that it matters? Because we're kind of used to these guys turning up to tournaments and running through them, but latterly they haven't turned up to these tournaments at all. Do you think it's still valid to say to Novak Djokovic, well, he comes and crushes these guys at 250s, and that's still something of an achievement, albeit maybe achievement's the wrong word, but do you know what I mean? Like, there's plenty of them who would turn up and just lose and, peak at the right time.
I'll be honest, I don't read loads into it. The only match I would have read something into was the Medvedev match. Everyone else I expect him to beat. And, I know that he's in the mix with the best players in the world now, which I would say are him, Nadal when he's fit, Medvedev, and Alcaraz. And I think he's massive favourite against anybody else. So I haven't read much into the last 2 weeks at all. He's done basically what I would expect him to do 19 times out of 20. I'm just a bit disappointed we didn't get to see how the Medvedev match played out.
Yeah, as we kind of
I
alluded,
think we could have had a real good read on where he's at.
As we've kind of alluded to there, Daniil Medvedev pulled out of their semi-final match after the second set. He had lost the first set and then won the second in a tiebreak. Djokovic, it's the other way around, wasn't it? Medvedev won the first set, Djokovic won the second set tiebreak, and gave it kind of quite a big roar and a big EDMO, and it looked like we had a really intriguing third set in a tournament that maybe wouldn't necessarily have expected to see it. And then he wandered to the net and kind of grabbed Djokovic's hand and said, no, that really is it. And it was weird, George. I don't think I've ever seen Djokovic look, or really anyone look quite so kind of puzzled by a retirement.
I mean, it must be quite a hard feeling when he was celebrating big, clearly trying to pump himself right up for this third set, trying to, you're probably just trying to psych out your opponent as much as anything else. Like, look, I'm back, baby. I'm going to come and slaughter you in the third. And then your opponent's like, yeah, all right, mate. You just have it then. You're kind of just taking yourself up to big heights and chopped down by him not wanting to be involved. I mean, it was really strange because I just didn't even clock anything like during that tiebreak. There wasn't really a moment. I think Medvedev said it was like was it the second point? He says he claims it happened, or he said it was quite early on. Djokovic played a brilliant start to the tiebreak, but Medvedev clawed it back to 5-5. It was playing some really, really fantastic stuff. You'd never have kind of said he's got some sort of problem. So yeah, it was a shame. It was a shame. I mean, I think without moving away from this too much, I think it's a bit weird that we've got to this stage now where we don't even consider like a win over Tsitsipas as good. Like that's quite a damning indictment. I'm not saying that I don't disagree with what you're saying there, Calvin, but it's funny how we've gone from this place where a couple of years ago people were like, oh, he's someone who can go really far in the tour. He's going to win slams. Do any of us think he's going to win a slam now? I mean, he just seems so. He played fine against Djokovic, and yet never looked like he was going to come close to beat him.
I think is he? I was going to say he hasn't progressed as a player in the last 2 years, but do you think he's even as good as he was 18 months ago?
As the guy who got to the French Open final.
Yeah.
I think he's hitting his forehand really well. Like that to me has become somewhat more of a weapon. It's just the other sides of his game just haven't progressed.
I think his forehand. I don't
all.
know. I mean, I'm not an expert. You guys know a lot more about this than I do, but just kind of looking at the numbers, I think his forehand has become more potent, but less reliable.
Consistent. That's probably a fair assessment to be fair.
It seems like he's become more of a risk taker on his forehand, for whatever reason, and that may be deliberate. That may just be the way his game has evolved. But I don't know. I would struggle to give. This is going to sound really kind of wanky, but I would struggle to give Tsitsipas a game identity at the moment. Like, if someone says to you, what sort of player is Stefanos Tsitsipas, I mean, George, you may be better at this, but I would struggle to kind of key into it.
I think, I'm trying, the match that really I thought was going to be a big turning point in his career was that one where he fought back at the Australian Open against Nadal. I thought that was going to be, that first kind of 5-set win. You think, right, this guy's going to go on now, take that next step forward and start really kind of challenging. And to be fair, he then did take that next step forward, got to the French Open final, got himself 2 sets up against Djokovic.
Cacked it.
And he's not been the same since, has he? I mean, he really hasn't. I mean, if we're talking about kind of stylistically what he's about, he's always been good. He does have a good serve when he gets it in. He does have a big forehand. But as you say, it did used to be a bit more of a kind of controlled big forehand, whereas it is massive now. I was really taken aback by some of the speeds it felt like, just from an eye test, felt he was hitting against Djokovic. But there were moments he's just wailing on it out of nowhere, running around. He loves running around his backhand return, trying to take that inside out forehand, and just keeps missing it. And I think players are just cottoning on to everything that's about him. They feel they can get at the backhand. We've always said defensively the backhand's not good enough. I don't know. It just feels like he's a guy people have figured out, and I'm not really sure what he's changing tactically. And mentally, he seems frail now, which you wouldn't really have expected from that guy who kind of came back against Rafa. That was meant to be the big mental push, and it's just not happening for him at the minute.
I mean, I would suggest that mentally that was rather the exception that proved the rule. He's always been someone who you kind of think, that Kyrgios match at Wimbledon this year was exactly the kind of match that I would try and play against him if I were a professional tennis player with the ability to get under someone's skin. I absolutely would try and get under someone's skin. And he kind of does the same, right? It's sort of the toilet break thing and the coaching stuff. It winds other players up. And I'm all for that. I'm all for shithousing in tennis. I think it's funny and it's, if you can get away with it in the rules, why not?
It is. He does do a lot of shithousing, but it's never like it brings him any wins. Probably the toilet breaks against Murray were the only time.
Yeah.
The stuff against Kyrgios, it cost him the match. He tried the same thing.
But the Kyrgios thing, Kyrgios took it to him there. Kyrgios took the shithousing to him.
Yeah, but then he started that nonsense trying to hit him with the ball when he could have passed him on that huge point. Then he did the same thing when he played Draper in the summer and he lost that match. I think, was that in a tie break?
I think he just lost. I think he just lost it against Kyrgios. I think his head completely went.
Yeah, but it's happening a hell of a lot, isn't it? And he doesn't seem like he's. I don't know the word. I would say stable. He's probably a perfectly stable lad, but on the court, he just doesn't. I thought even at Laver Cup, he just seems awkward in those.
He doesn't have the bubble. I think it's so important as a player, to be able to. And sports psychologists will talk about it a lot. Creating stability is a word they use, creating familiarity. And, Rafa is the king of it. Everything that Rafa does is to create familiarity and stability for his psychological mindset. And players are always trying to do that. And I feel like Tsitsipas hasn't worked out how to do that yet.
But also, his dad, he's got his dad as his coach. Is his dad any good as a coach?
I was just going to say this. He feels to me like he's just someone who needs to pull away from his parents, doesn't he? I mean,
yeah.
We've spoken about it before, haven't we? But there was that weird press conference where his mum came in and was asking him questions and stuff. And you're like, this is so odd for like a 20-year-old man to be having his mum sitting there like, aren't you lucky to have your mum coming around on the tour with you? Yeah, I know. You know, it is a weird life being on tour and stuff, and you do need kind of close people around you. But I've always just thought, and particularly now, when you're seeing no real tactical evolution kind of happening in his game, no kind of addressing of these weaknesses. If I were him, I'd be pulling the trigger on Apostolos and trying to get in someone else who can have a look.
I don't know if there's a way of getting around that backhand, though. I think he's probably... I don't see what you can do on it. It's not a good shot. And you can't reshape a backhand at 24 years old.
On the coaching front, just to kind of note that there have been new faces in the camp this year. Thomas Enqvist was working with him for a couple of months earlier in the year. Mark Philippoussis has always been kind of in and out, but he's been a lot more visible in the camp over the last couple of months. At Wimbledon, he was on court with him almost every day, and he's always been like quite a big part of his development, but has been much more formally into it. So there is kind of movement there. Yeah,
but again, though, like, are they good coaches? Is Philippoussis a good coach? I remember when he was playing, and I never once heard him say anything compelling and interesting about the sport. He just had an absolute cannon, and he didn't make the most of his own ability. And
I guess I'd be kind of thinking, and this is very simplistic and reductive, but you're almost looking for the Severin Luthi in Federer's camp, or the Vida in Djokovic's camp, or the Uncle Tony in Nadal's camp. You want that kind of day-to-day presence rather than just some kind of bloke who's come in and saying mental things to Tsitsipas. While we're saying the mentality is maybe not there perfectly, I think there's actually bigger, more fundamental changes that need to happen with his game and tactically that I'm not really sure will work with just kind of ex-pros coming in. And not so ex-pros can't be good coaches, but I think he does need that kind of really specialist day-to-day workhorse coach, if you like. Get Calvin on board, obviously.
It's almost like be a workhorse there, journeyman.
Absolutely. That's a fair description.
I think the thing is, though, with I guess the whole family, it kind of there's an element that there's a lot of, I don't know if cutting corners is the right word, but like he should be a brilliant tennis player, and he's dicking around with these stupid like toilet breaks and that kind of thing. It's like 12 and under stuff. What you're doing, but also at the same time, like the business with his brother, where his brother seems to be now sort of focusing on being a doubles specialist, but they haven't sort of put him there and gone, right, make of your career what you will on a natural course. They're getting Stefanos to put him in enough doubles tournaments that they'll get enough decent draws down the line, and Stefanos is such a decent player that they'll pick enough wins up. And now his brother's ranked like, I think, 180, and he's nowhere near the 180th best tennis player on the doubles circuit.
I mean, I should interject on behalf of Vicky Georgiatou, who is the best Greek tennis journalist, and always says to me whenever I see her, she says, Petros, he's not that bad. He's not that bad. But I know that you would disagree with that.
No. Listen, he's not. The lad he's a lovely kid. Is Petros. I know him relatively well, and he's not a terrible tennis player. And I don't know where he could have gone. Maybe down the line he could make it as a doubles player on his own. But the way they've gone about it is not how you should go about developing a tennis career, other than if you're looking to take shortcuts. And I just think the whole family, with Stefanos, with his dad, and with Petros, there's an element that they're just trying to get there in a different way than what they ought to be if they want to make the most of their careers.
I'll tell you who the next logical Stefanos Tsitsipas coach is. It's Patrick Muratoglu.
Well, he's involved, isn't he?
Well, yeah, I think he basically just trains there, right?
Like, yeah, he does. That's what they all do.
Yeah.
But if he was winning now, Patrick would claim that he's coaching him.
George,
is there any extra pressure? I'm not trying to make excuses for him, but kind of coming from a country like Greece, does that add a little bit kind of extra on being that kind of first player coming through? He's a massive star there. Is there anything in that compared to
I don't know.
normal tennis nature?
I don't think so. No, I really don't think there's any real pressure there. I don't think you feel that. I'll tell you who would be interesting, but I don't know. I can't think of a name. If only there was a top class one-handed backhand recently retired player who might fancy staying in the game and coaching an elite level top 10
Dominic
player.
Thiem hasn't retired yet.
I can't think of anybody though.
We're just running out of time, but before we go, just to answer your question, George, funnily enough, I asked two different people this last summer almost that exact question, one of whom was Maria Sakkari and the other of whom was Yelena Ostapenko, and they both gave quite different, or similar but different answers. And Maria Sakkari said, well, I'm not back in Greece very much, and when I'm there I can still kind of walk down the street and people don't bother me too much, but then with the French Open run, that really changed things, and it actually took a bit of adjustment, when she went back there, and it did affect her a bit. But then she kind of learned how to deal with it, and she says that people are never really intrusive, and they don't make her life difficult. Whereas, like, Yelena Ostapenko was like, yeah, I'm a national hero at home, and I bloody love it. Like, she absolutely owns it, and she just enjoys the idea that she is... And I think also because Latvia, compared to Greece, is an even smaller country, she really is flying the Latvian flag, all around the world. Admittedly, Greece is still a small country, but Latvia is a proper minnow. It doesn't have many big sports stars. Greece has a few, tennis is still not as big as basketball there, as football there. Whereas basically because of Yelena Ostapenko, like, Latvia is a tennis country now because they love Yelena.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. There are some monthly expenses you just can't get away from, like insurance. You might be looking at your expenses thinking you're going to have to pause on your DIY project, stop collecting vinyl, or even give up your daily coffee fix to have great insurance. Talk about a nightmare. It's a good thing State Farm knows everyone has a budget, and they have a range of options, like insuring your ride and your home with surprisingly great rates on both. With State Farm, you can also personalize your policy, so you get the coverage you need at a price that lets you keep up with your projects, add to your vinyl collection, and continue to enjoy your coffee habits. So forget about giving up what you love to have great insurance. For surprisingly great rates, like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Call or go to statefarm.com for a quote today.
Welcome back to the Love Tennis Podcast. I'm James Gray of iNews.co.uk and the iNewspaper. The man from Yorkshire is Calvin Betton and the Midlander is George Bellshaw. We've been talking about Novak Djokovic, Stefanos Tsitsipas and a bit of Daniil Medvedev as well. I meant to incidentally just kind of insert smoothly, but instead I'm going to do it like out of place and as a reminder, just Daniil Medvedev's explanation of his injury, which I know a lot of people saw kind of online. He said, it's the second time in my life I've retired like this with a pulled muscle. So here on the second point of the tiebreak, I felt a strange pop in my adductor. I thought it was maybe cramp. After the point, I was like, it's probably not cramp. I don't know what is fair. If I won, I would not have played the final. I was like, okay, just try to hit some shots. If I manage to win the second set, well, I'll retire. If I don't manage to win the second set, I'll retire. We're not clear. He's going to have a scan, and we're not clear on his status for the rest of the season. He, of course, I'm just trying to think, is he already qualified for the race, or is he pretty close?
Not quite, I don't think. But
there you go. He's fifth in the race, so he's virtually guaranteed. So he will be hoping to get fit for Turin. I want to move on, though, because we talked lots about ATP and not a lot about the WTA, where Barbora Krejcikova, the French Open champion, beat Iga Swiatek in a final. She's only the second person ever to do that, I believe, at the 19th time of asking. A really great final as well. There were match points for both women before finally Krejcikova got over the line. George, this is interesting, isn't it? Because I think we had, maybe not verbally, but there are a lot of people thinking, and a lot of people saying on Twitter, where they're always very quick to judge, that Barbora Krejcikova was done. She was a one-hit wonder, won the French Open, consigned her to being a doubles specialist once again. And she's really proven that she's absolutely not. That's back-to-back titles in Tallinn and then Ostrava, beating Swiatek 5-7, 7-6, 6-3.
I don't know who was saying that.
Oh, George, come on. Twitter was full of it.
Twitter. No,
the old Twitter sphere, it's sort of social media.
I mean, I know Krejcikova's had big injury problems the last 6 to 12 months, but for me, she's mentally as sound as anyone up there apart from Swiatek. Like, I genuinely think she's as likely to win a slam as anyone else on the tour who's not Iga Swiatek over the next 12 to 18 months. I think she's proven herself time and time again to A, be a very good player, but B, be pretty steely and quite consistent when she's fit. So I think for people to kind of write her off as a one-hit wonder because she's had quite significant injury problems is very harsh, because actually I think the body of evidence suggests to me that, you probably say stick Jabeur in there as well in terms of consistency, but of the rest of the pack, I think she's very, very likely to go deep in majors. And I expect her to be someone no one wants to face at the Australian Open.
Her run, incidentally, in Ostrava included beating Belinda Bencic, albeit that was by walkover, so it hardly counts. But she did beat Shelby Rogers, Alicia Parks, who I know has been in good form, and Elena Rybakina, the Wimbledon champion. In both the semi-final and the final, she came from a set down to win a close second set tiebreak, and then came through in the final set, which, George, as you mentioned, does suggest a kind of mental toughness. And remember, in her title in Tallinn, she beat the top 3 seeds in a row: Beatrice Haddad-Mayer, Belinda Bencic, who did turn up for that one, and Annette Kontaveit in a very dominant performance in the final.
Bencic couldn't face meeting her 2 weeks in a row. That's what she pulled out.
Bottled
like,
it.
Can't do this again.
Bottled it in a massive way. And actually, as someone who was there when Krejcikova tried to defend her French Open title, and watched her sob her way off the court after being beaten by Diane Parry, I'm quite glad to see her playing well again. She basically wasn't remotely fit. She'd had an elbow injury. She'd barely played in fact, she hadn't played, I think, competitively for 3 months in the build-up to the tournament. She then got COVID, I think, the next day. So overall, it was a pretty miserable French Open defence. Do you think she's I mean, I always hate saying, is X or Y good for tennis? But given that there are lots of other players out there who people will be able to name and spell, is it a good thing to have Barbora Krejcikova, bouncing around at the top? I don't know.
I think it's good to have anyone who can consistently rival Iga Swiatek. Else we're in danger of just having an era where we sit around and think, all right, Swiatek's going to win this, then that's great. Obviously marvel at her greatness, but also be like, well, everyone else is rubbish, aren't they? So why is she actually that good? That's always the kind of the narrative that pervades when that happens. So, I'm actively hoping, it doesn't matter who it is, whether it's Krejcikova or Goff or, Jabeur taking that next step up, which I don't think she actually can take. But, I think Krejcikova and Goff have the games that are capable of challenging Swiatek in big matches. I don't think they're as good as Swiatek, but I think they're the sort of players who can beat Swiatek when she's having a bad day. And there's not many of them out there at the minute, to be honest.
Do you think, Calvin, that she's 26, I think, now, and has obviously won something like 6 Grand Slam doubles titles, and I think, the first of them was 4 years ago. Do you think she's got a real advantage over the field that is the top 15 at the moment by just having so much experience under her belt in top-level tennis, singles or doubles?
Yeah, and also she's therefore played a lot of matches with a lot of pressure on them. But I think her main attribute is she's just a quality tennis player. She really is. She's probably, aside from Swiatek, she's probably the most complete player on the tour as well when she's fully fit. She can do everything. It's staying fit that I think will be a problem. And it's a bit of a catch-22 for her as well, because the best way of staying fit would be probably to play less matches, but she plays doubles. She's probably the best doubles player in the world, female. So it's whether she wants to stop doing that to play a singles, but she really loves playing doubles.
George, if you're Barbora Krejcikova's agent tomorrow morning and you have this big conversation, what's the plan?
I keep playing both. I think she's someone who genuinely is there just because they love playing tennis, which, and they love winning, and she will win doubles titles. They're a great pairing. I wouldn't tell someone to stop playing doubles for fear of not having another 5 years on the end of your singles career when you can win lots of slams, and you just have to look at like Kyrgios and Kokkinakis this win. They absolutely loved winning the Australian Open. Just winning a doubles slam is still a fantastic, wonderful thing for, it shouldn't be downplayed because it's not singles. So I'd definitely say just keep going.
George would be the worst agent on the agent circuit. Every single agent I know would say, stop playing doubles.
I'd say that publicly, Calvin, but behind the scenes I'd be like, stop. Give me the dollar.
Make me more money winning loads of singles Grand Slams. No, just keep playing doubles if you really enjoy it.
I would also say that it, just thinking about this, is it good for women's tennis or whatever? It's also quite good to have, like, another Czech girl at the top. Like, I sometimes think, do we have too many Czech women in tennis in the top 20 or top 50 of women's tennis? But I actually think it's quite good to have this like one powerhouse where you can say build a big fan base and a bit like what I was saying with Yelena Ostapenko and Latvia. If you can make like a country that is absolutely passionate for the sport, it sort of creates, you can kind of osmosize that into other countries, and if you can hold good tournaments in the Czech Republic, and I know they haven't, this is my big problem actually, is that the Czech Republic just churns out these incredible female tennis players, but whenever I watch a tournament in the Czech Republic, I'm a bit like, why are there not more people here? Like, I don't know, Calvin, you've been to the Czech Republic for tournaments. I mean, why is there not more kind of passion for this sport that they're so clearly very good at?
I don't know. I mean, I've only been once. I went to Prague last year, and the club was, there's a good club atmosphere. You always tell where there's like good clubs. The way to tell if clubs are busy is they have a menu, what you can eat there, and proper food, because they've got a chef, which means if in order to employ a chef, they're busy enough to do something rather than just having the barman put some toasties on, And that club in Prague had an extensive menu of decent food. So I assume they've got a good club culture and that type of thing. But yeah, I don't know. It's a strange one, isn't it? Maybe it's because they don't have loads of male players since Berdych went.
Yeah. Other than Lucas Rosol, who I know you've got a very specific opinion about.
It's not just me who has that opinion.
Yuri Vesely.
The great Yuri Vesely. I mean, to be fair, you say they haven't got like a great male scene and not at the top of the game, but there are a couple of guys who coming through I think might do some damage.
There's always loads of play. They've always got plenty of players in depth and that kind of thing. I'm talking about a real, like Berdych was one of the very best players in the world for a while.
Yeah.
Not many players can boast Yuri Vesely's record against Novak Djokovic.
Yeah, but he's also world number 99, George, and I think that's pretty much...
He'd be world number 1 if he played Djokovic every week.
Well, quite, and let's all be thankful that doesn't happen every week. Interesting to see how Barbora Krejcikova's season goes from now on. I'm pretty sure she is going to be... I know that she is currently leading the doubles race. I don't think she's going to make it for singles as well, although stranger things have happened. She's 20th at the moment, so she's going to need an absolute miracle, despite those 2 titles in a row, but she will be in Texas, Fort Worth, Texas, for the doubles. One person... Sorry, Calvin.
I was just thinking there on that. I was thinking about that earlier, actually. Do we think, like, for the year-end finals, is there a call for having, like, wild cards for certain situations? Because it definitely makes... The tournament is definitely better with Krejcikova in there. The tournament's definitely better with Medvedev in there, and both of them are not in there specifically because they've not played the full season.
Well, Medvedev almost certainly is going to qualify.
But say he doesn't. Say he actually had... Say he had to have an extra month out than what he did, and we'd have ended up without him in there. I think, yeah.
It's a good point.
Kyrgios could have been in there, couldn't he?
You probably, yeah. I mean, if we had a wild card, I think Kyrgios would be it, right? Like if there were a wild card in the men's, You'd say the Wimbledon finalist who doesn't get in would be the wild card. I mean, there kind of is a wild card, a sort of de facto one, because if you win a Grand Slam, you don't have to finish in the top 8. You only have to finish in the top 20. So that's the sort of fail-safe. Like Djokovic, depending on exactly what he gets up to over the next month or two, probably won't qualify in the top 8. But he is now guaranteed to be there because he's a Grand Slam winner and he's guaranteed, I think, to finish in the top 20.
Yeah. He's actually not down to play again before the ATP finals. I wonder if he will take a wild card.
Is he not going to play Paris?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, excuse me. He's not allowed to play anything before Paris. Sorry. But that's kind of surprising because he normally rocks up to either it's Vienna or what's the other one? Basel. It's Vienna he normally plays, I think. But I wonder if he will take a wild card into one of those just to keep racking up points. If you can't guarantee you're going to get the slams, you may as well take the points where you can get them.
There is like a big wild card available in Basel. So, yeah, I mean, you'd think they'll keep that open as long as they possibly can. I don't know. We'll see. You'd think, given he's not played that much tennis, and given it would kind of cement his ranking for next year as well, you'd think he's still... Was he world number 7 at the moment? Like, that's not where he wants to be. He doesn't want to go...
I think he might be like 10 in the race or something.
Yeah.
So he probably wants to bump that up, obviously.
But he doesn't want to go into like the Australian Open, assuming he plays it. I know that this week in Australia, there's been some suggestion once again that his ban might stand and he might not be there. But he doesn't want to go into Australia and be like the number 7 seed, does he? He doesn't want to play, Carlos Alcaraz in the quarterfinal or play Nadal in the quarterfinal. That'd be, while he would expect to win, it would be a pain in the backside. So if he's fit, you'd think he might just try and pick up as many points as possible and then head to Turin in some good nick.
Obviously, he's chasing the Connors record now, which I'm more and more persuaded he's actually going to do after back-to-back titles.
Yeah, a few comments on YouTube about that this week. Just pretty split, actually. I think people are not quite sure whether he might actually make it, but it'd be interesting to see how he goes. He's obviously still quite some way short. He's got a couple of years to go, I would think. Let's move on because Emma Raducanu has been in the news today. In fact, she was named in the Great Britain squad for the Billie Jean King Cup, which gets underway in Glasgow on the 8th of November. She was named alongside Harriet Dart, Katie Boulter and Heather Watson. One more space to be filled in that team. We would expect Katie Swan, who's in great form. I think Katie Swan's only lost once since Wimbledon, I think I'm right in saying. She's absolutely flying. 13 wins in 14 matches. She won a title in Slovakia yesterday, and she also got to the semi-final in Chennai, as well as picking up a title in the US. So she's been going very well, and you'd expect to see her in the 5th place in the team. We didn't know whether Emma Raducanu would make it into the team because she has been struggling with a wrist injury. She pulled out of her... Well, in fact, she called an end to her WTA season by pulling out with that wrist injury. She may yet play the Billie Jean King Cup. I know she's been named, which would suggest that she will, but they can make changes up until the day before. So I would think that everyone involved will want her to stay in the team for as long as possible. I'm not being cynical and saying they're going to try and sell tickets off the back of her name, but I suspect that she will do everything possible to play. George, we've talked about injuries so many different times, but maybe just looking forward to next season because her season is basically over. We don't expect Great Britain to have much of an impact, frankly, on the Billie Jean King Cup finals. What's her kind of... I asked Calvin this question, I think, while you were away. What's her goal for next season? What's a valid goal, given that she's currently, I think, world number 68?
I mean, if we're talking in terms of ranking, for me, there's no reason she can't push into top 30 by the end of next season. I think that's a realistic goal. I don't think that requires that much consistency in the women's game at the minute. I think what I'd be looking for more broadly is just more stability. I'd like to see her stick with a coach for a year. That would be nice. I would like to see fewer injuries, a bit more robustness. That's not me criticizing her for getting injured. That's just me saying, the reality is she needs to develop herself and learn to deal with the rigors of the tour. So seeing her not withdraw from matches and tournaments would obviously be a positive step. I'd like to see a bit more to her game in many ways. I've seen a few matches she played this year, kind of in the run-up to the US Open, where she was hitting the ball how I would call properly again, and I was really enjoying watching her. I think she's an electric player when she is on the front foot. I still think that's the best of her, is when she's kind of going for it, not being passive. I've seen her in too many matches just put the ball back in, landing short court, and then good players are kind of swatting her aside like a fly. So yeah, I think, a bit more robustness, pulling up to be around top 30 and being positive on court in terms of playing style would be the three things I would look for most.
We know the goals that Calvin has set her, but I want to ask you something different, Calvin. I wrote something which I kind of spoke to you about before it came out, and that the LTA announced last week. People might remember that when the Raducanu US Open final against Fernandez was broadcast on Channel 4, they paid Amazon an amount of money which was undisclosed, but it was a seven-figure sum. I would guess it's around £2 to £3 million, just using some intelligent guessing. Amazon said that money would be reinvested into women's tennis, that Raducanu herself would have some input into how that would be reinvested, and they announced last week exactly how they would be doing that. It's called the Prime Video LTA Youth Girls Programme. It wants to create a lasting legacy for Raducanu's victory. It's going to fund a whole load of free equipment for new players, so any girl who turns up to any of these sessions that the program will fund will get a free racket, some free tennis balls, a free t-shirt. I mean, I'll do almost anything for a free t-shirt, so if that's not enough incentive, I don't know what is. And they're also going to run a series of training sessions for coaches, up to 200 of them, to kind of create a more girl-specific coaching framework. Now, of course, we have one of the country's leading coaches on our podcast to talk about whether he agrees or disagrees. Now, Calvin, you work with lots of girls. I know through obviously the County Cup stuff that you do with Yorkshire, and as you have through your career. Is it true to say that tennis does lose girls at a certain age? I guess all sports do, right?
Yeah. It also loses boys as well. It's not that all boys stick in it and girls fade away from it, but it probably loses girls a bit more, I'd say. I wouldn't say drastically more. I know a lot of lads who pack in playing tennis at the same age.
And
yeah.
is it the same age? There's not like a different age where you tend to have a breaking point, or?
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, but then again, it is. But then again, it could be anything between 13 and 17. I'd say tennis in Britain has a specific problem with girls. And this is before I worked with the lads who I work with now. I ran a program at an indoor tennis centre in Batley, just outside of Leeds, and it has a problem. One of the problems it has with girls not leaving the game, but in terms of moving on and losing a bit of interest for it, is specifically the American college system.
Right.
In that, I don't know whether people know this, but the college system with the scholarship system that they run in America, there's more money available for scholarships for females than there is for males. That's specifically because each college has to allocate the same amount of money across all sports for females as they do for male sports.
Right.
But the men have an American football team, which takes up about 60 players. So you need to find scholarships for that. Therefore, the tennis scholarships, it's very difficult for a male player to get a full scholarship to an American university. It doesn't happen. Whereas they can't give them away at colleges in America.
I see.
So basically what you get, how that feeds back into Britain is that most players are encouraged to go to American colleges. The lads are fighting to get the best scholarship they can possibly get to get themselves another couple of £100 a week onto their scholarships. The girls figure out around about the age of 15, they're getting a full scholarship anyway. They don't really have to. And I've seen this firsthand. It's happened. Girls kind of lose interest. They know they're going to go to university. That's what they want to do. But they already know they're getting the full scholarship. So their interest wanes. And what you get then is very few of the girls then play tennis after they've left American uni.
It's very interesting. I don't know whether you've heard more since we chatted like a week ago about what the LTA are going to do with these kind of female-specific sessions they're trying to set up. I mean, do you think that it will make a difference? Do you think it's coming from a good place? I know you were kind of sceptical when I spoke to you initially.
Yeah, I don't really. It's not something I buy into because, in my experience, that as I said to you on the phone when we spoke last week, James, that they're just different people. In my experience, there's nothing that you can't pigeonhole all girls the same. All girls like to do this. All boys like to do this. They're just different people. Some of the girls are similar to some of the lads, and some aren't. I don't get this idea that girls they want to go where their friends are, like that. That's not my experience of coaching female tennis players, girl tennis players at all. That they like doing certain things that the boys don't like doing, and that some of them that they only like going to sessions with girls. That's not my experience of 15 years working with boys and girls, and they're just kids are just different. I don't think you can say all girls want to do this, all boys want to do this, and this is how we need to coach them. I've never liked to blow my own trumpet at all, but I've done pretty well with girls. I've coached 2 British number ones, under 16s and under 18s. I never had any specific how to coach girls instruction.
Will you be applying for this course, Calvin?
No.
I was going to suggest to you that you go in as our mole and leak specific details. Never mind.
From what he's just said, it sounds like me. Calvin's got the resume to lead the course. He'll be banging his door down.
No, but you don't. I think it's good that they're making an effort to do something. In my opinion, it's targeted in the wrong areas. I think, yeah, and it's what you want to do. Are we just trying to keep girls in the game, or are we trying to make good tennis players out of them?
I think this is what kind of bothered me about it, just reading the kind of bump around it was, and I spoke to, lots of people off the record about what was trying to be achieved, and I didn't get much of a sense that it was, we want to produce 10 more top 100 players by, converting 100 to 300s into top 100s, or we want to get 20,000 more players playing the game at grassroots level and that'll filter through. It just felt like we're going to put lots of more money into it and we'll get more good players.
And the thing, what the LTA, and I feel comfortable saying this, it always cracks me when people refer to the LTA, because I always ask them, who do you mean?
Yeah.
Like there. But what the LTA participation department, they always continually get wrong, and they repeatedly get it wrong. They focus on getting new players in. They think that is what participation is. And we have this thing again, and I know heard you say it just then, James, providing equipment for them. We're going to get them equipment. We're going to do starter sessions. What happens when those starter sessions have done?
Yeah.
What happens when you've given all of your 300 rackets out, and then those players decide that they, what if 25% of those players decide we want to stay in the game here, we want to keep playing? There's nothing for that. They always rank participation as new players starting to play. That's how the LTA always do their figures. New players coming in. But what happened to last year's new players who now don't have anywhere to go?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so important. Like, you talk to anyone who works in sport development. I know this is quite technical and not necessarily super engaging, but you talk to anyone who works in this, as you do, Calvin, and I talk to people across all different sports. And it's always about, and it sounds boring, creating a pathway. Like, it's genuinely like thinking about how someone progresses with the game. And it's like, okay, yes, as you say, they've done that first 6-week course one summer. How are they going to play once a week? Because school aren't going to do it, and they're not going to join a club because that's a bit too much commitment. Where's that secondary stage?
If they, the way that I would go about it. They've got to find a way of putting women's tennis on television. That's a way to do it. Women's tennis, the rights for the WTA wouldn't cost a fortune now. They've got to get it on the television. If you've got to make it visible. Girls, 12-year-old girls are not going to go searching through the Amazon menus that take 20 minutes to get to a tennis match. Again, I'll come back to my experience. The biggest increase in participation I have ever seen in a sport, I might have mentioned this on the podcast before, was in 2005 when England won the Ashes and it was on Channel 4 for the first time. It came off of Sky. That summer, tennis lost about 60% of its players because they all went to play cricket.
Jeez.
And that's because everyone watched it. And I realise the world has changed a bit there. I'm not saying that all girls sit and watch tennis now.
Yeah.
But if there was a tennis, say, for example, if there was a WTA, even just the quarter semis and finals on Channel 4 every other week, I guarantee you'd improve your female tennis participation by about 200%.
Yeah. And you only have to really look at what, like, and I know people in cricket, lots of them hate the 100, but having the women's game alongside it and giving the women's game lots of prominence on the BBC and with free streams on YouTube, I mean, I play for a cricket club where girl participation numbers are just going mental because it's visible and girls are going, oh, we've got role. You know, if you can see it, you can be it. I say that a lot, and I genuinely think it's true. If you're a kid and you see someone who looks like you doing something, you feel you can do it, George.
I'll tell you where I always think tennis misses a massive trick. You know, I think this is kind of being a young boy when I was. Cricket used to have like highlights on the BBC kind of late at night for some of the kind of the T20 World Cups or something. And I'd watch all these highlights of like Malinga and McGrath and Warne. And I wasn't a big cricket fan at all, but I remember fondly watching it. I remember that famous xylophone piece of music, which is slipping my mind. I always just think tennis has never nailed a highlights package. The whole time I've watched
Oh my God.
It's so bad.
So it's because I can't remember which way around it is, whether it's the WTA or the ATP. I'm pretty sure it's the WTA. These highlights packages, a lot of them are automated. So they go on YouTube and it's run by AI that picks points, not at random, you know, and it will pick like some quite exciting points, but it doesn't pick significant points. It picks like a great point at 15 all 2-2, and then like the next highlight is like in the second set. And you don't, you know, they're not cohesive. And honestly, George, I'm right there with you. It's infuriating.
I think as well, you know, I've used cricket as an example there. It's a much more recent one. Look at the women's football over the summer. And again, it was on BBC. If that tournament would have been on Sky, there wouldn't have been as much interest in it. If it was on Amazon, there'd have been zero interest in it because no one would have tuned in. But it was right there on terrestrial television, and girls started wanting to play football. But I'll say this about the program again. Look, we don't have a shortage of entry-level development coaches and good entry-level development coaches in Britain. There's loads of them. There's absolutely loads of them in every town. What we do have a shortage of is good high-performance level coaches who take the players to the next level. So just developing more entry-level coaches is for female players is I don't know. I'm not buying into that.
Yeah. I mean, just one final point on the broadcasting, but you know, what was the most watched tennis match last year in the UK? Raducanu's final, lobbed it on Channel 4. They got the exposure out there. People know who she is. They still go on about who she is. They are all wondering where she's gone because of that one match. Like being like, okay, there was a bit of Wimbledon as well in the summer. We shouldn't take Wimbledon for granted, but tennis really needs to find a way of just punctuating the rest of the year. People used to always ask me, what do you do? Your job's only about 2 weeks of the year. It's only Wimbledon. You know, people have no idea. This is the longest season of all sport. It's crazy.
It's the question I get asked the most. So, tennis coach, do you do that full time? No, I'm actually an electrician. I just said I'm a tennis coach for the laugh of it. No, look, if there's look at channel, there's nothing ever on Channel 5. It's the biggest waste of a channel ever. If the LTA went to Channel 5, here's No, but if they just went to Channel 5, look, here's, I don't know how much it costs. Here's $2 million. Buy the WTA rights for the next 2 years.
Yeah.
That'd be the best way to spend the money.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, if the LTA paid for it, 100%. But so one of my good mates is the deputy head of scheduling for Channel 5. And, like, I often have a go at him about them. Like, they put boxing on, but they only put, like, the last 2 hours of the card on. I always have a go. And he's like, I'm not going to put, like, something that I know doesn't rate on my only main channel on Saturday night prime time. But tennis, you could fill a lot of airtime with tennis.
It's in the afternoon as well.
Yeah.
It's in the afternoon. WTA finals, WTA final in any European city is on Sunday afternoon. I'm not sure there's loads of stuff on Sunday afternoon.
You're telling me the people who sit around watching the Antiques Roadshow and Doctors wouldn't just watch tennis? People
I
watch
don't think the
whatever's
Antiques
just on in the
Roadshow is
middle
on
of the
Channel
day.
5, in fairness.
Not Channel 5, but I just mean in terms of like daytime broadcasting. I just
Yeah.
refuse to believe that if those things are what people are watching because they want to watch them, then that is a sign that anyone will watch anything that's on in the middle of the day who's watching it.
We're running out of time, so we're going to do some quick hits on people I promised that we'd talk about. Taylor Fritz beat Francis Tiafoe, which is significant for a number of reasons, partly because it meant that he became only the second player this season to win a 250, a 500 and a 1,000 level event in the men's game, along with Novak Djokovic. He also won 2 tie-breaks against Francis Tiafoe, who was on an insane run of something like 14 tie-breaks in a row, which is completely absurd. One-word answers. What number in the world will Taylor Fritz be this time next year? George first.
Oh, God, that's a hard one. So he's up to 8 now, right?
Yeah, he's at a career high of 8, thanks to that title.
I mean, I do like, sorry.
Crikey, this one-word answer is already quite long.
I'll go 11.
Calvin?
12.
I'm going 17. I'm not buying it. Which is also not a one-word answer, so I apologise. Nick Kyrgios, he was in action in Japan as well, but he handed his opponent a walkover with what was described as a knee injury. He also had to pull out of the doubles as well. His opponent was, of course, Taylor Fritz. There has been a little bit of movement in his legal case in Australia. This is pretty complicated stuff, and I have written something for the Eye about Nick Kyrgios' legal case. I would urge you to read it because it will do a better job, because I spoke to a couple of lawyers in Australia who really know what they're talking about and explained quite nicely what the big issues are. I'm not going to talk about the case specifically, but there are 2 things you kind of need to know about it. One is the charge, which is common assault, which is what was described to me as the lowest type of assault charge. There is a more serious offence of assault causing actual bodily harm. Common assault suggests that it's been an assault without marks or injury left. So it's known as the kind of lowest form of assault in Australian law. Nick Kyrgios' lawyer has said that they're going to apply for a Section 334 application. It means that they think the case shouldn't go through any further legal process, that they think it should effectively be dismissed. The lawyer I spoke to described it as more of a diversion from the legal system, not a kind of I'm diverting away from this case, but a diversion. He said it basically is like a mental illness defence, which you might be more familiar with in the UK. They think it's more appropriate to discontinue the criminal proceedings. The judge might ask for the applicant to undergo some treatment or some specific mental health course of treatment, but essentially the case would be dismissed. Now, that's all I think we're going to say about it. It's active criminal proceedings. You'll understand that we can't really make any comment on it. I would hate that this podcast be responsible for a trial, as unlikely as it might seem, for a trial involving domestic violence to break down. So that's all we're going to say about it. It seems like a slightly bum note to end the podcast on, which is why I'm going to offer George the opportunity to give us any other business.
The only other thing I did want to say that we kind of missed out on was, and I don't think we mentioned it unless I've blocked it out, but Alcaraz
Correct.
Lost his first match as US Open champion and world number 1. Just wanted to I guess we could do quick one-word answers for this. Blip in the road or a sign he can't handle being the top of the pile?
Well, so he lost to lucky loser David Goffin, which is particularly kind of funny. It was his first match in 63 that he hadn't even managed to win a set, I believe. And I'm trying to remember that I think that only 2 other men have lost their first match as world number 1. And I think it's Leighton Hewitt and his coach, Juan Carlos Ferrero. I think I'm right in saying that. What was the either-or question, George?
Can he handle being number 1 or just a small bump in the road?
Yes, he can handle it. Calvin?
On that one, James, Patrick Rafter is the only player to have never won a match as world number 1.
Wow.
Because he never played one.
That's incredible.
Yeah, he was world number 1 for 2 weeks and didn't play those 2 weeks.
I'm fairly sure Murray's quite up there in terms of worst statistics as world number 1, like in terms of match win.
Well, because he basically flogged himself to death getting there, and then didn't have a whole lot left. On those bombshells, I think we have to end. Thank you so much for listening, as always, to the Love Tennis Podcast. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, drop us a follow on Twitter at LoveTennisPod. Email us, lovetennispod@gmail.com. Leave us a rating. Leave us a review. If you don't do any of that, make sure you come back next week.
Sports Social Podcast Network.